Regents Prep number 6. Our aim today is how did early American governments exemplify the concept of democracy? And what I really want to focus on today is these early colonial governments that we will talk about. How did they show the rights that people have? How do they differ from those that they were living under in Europe, where it was a monarchy? Things like that. That's what we're going to focus on today. We are talking about the early governments of America, and we're going to start off with colonial beliefs on government. Colonial beliefs on government existed limits on government. Governments existed to protect the people's natural rights, life, liberty, and protection of property. Remember John Locke, life, liberty, and property. And the people in America, believed that the European leaders had gotten away from this, and they had gotten too much government. Government was controlling them. So they wanted to make sure that government existed to protect the people, not hold them down. The freedom of the press, the Zenger trial. Just make sure you kind of have an idea about it. It's beginning of preventing government from controlling what was written in the papers. This is going to be basically the early freedom of the press. And the Mayflower Compact, which is very important. If you guys remember, the first group of Europeans come here on the Mayflower, and as they are coming over here on this voyage to the New World, they realize that in order to be successful here, there needs to be some sort of format for a set of rules, that they can't just all walk off the boat without any rules or it'd be anarchy. So the men on the Mayflower, before they got to land, signed the Mayflower Compact. The compact's another word for an agreement. And the Mayflower Compact was an agreement by the Pilgrims before leaving the Mayflower, and this was an early example of colonial self-government. This group of people coming over on the Mayflower governing themselves, and basically, just like, say, a classroom, they had a set of rules to follow in order to live in society in a positive way. Colonial assemblies and local governments. And these are your early types of governments in America. You have the Virginia House of Burgesses, which starts in 1619, which is the first step towards Republican government when they instituted first Republican lawmaking body in the colonies. And really what you have here is you have people representing the ideas of a group of people, right? They elect, in Virginia, they elected, each town elected one representative to go to meet in this assembly to represent them. And this was, a Republican ideal because you are voting for someone who will go and represent you. And more democratic was the New England town meetings, where local governments participate in town meetings where the citizens, at this time the citizens were talking just white men with land, were able to voice their opinions. This is the most direct form of democracy. And town hall meetings still happen today, where people go and they speak their mind openly, to their governments. And both types of governments have been in some way implemented into our government system today. Which goes to our protest to British rule. By the mid 1700s, the colonists realized that they are being taken advantage of, and they are being taxed without representation, taxation without representation, and they have no say in their government. Right, they are controlled by a king and parliament, which is across an ocean, and they have no representation in parliament. And they protest when their tea is taxed. If you see the picture on the right, the Boston Tea Party. And then Common Sense, which we learned about by Thomas Paine, convinces undecided American voters to support the American Revolution. And finally, they declare their independence with the Declaration of Independence, which is a list of complaints or grievances against Great Britain. And if you guys remember earlier in the year, I compared this to the breakup letter, right, an American breakup letter. The colonists were breaking up with England, and they were making their own country, the United States of America, because Britain had taken away their natural rights, life, liberty, and property. When America becomes its own country, they need their own government. And their first attempt at a government is called the Articles of Confederation. If we think back, the reason the Articles of Confederation is so weak is because America was afraid of a strong government. They had just gotten away from the king, and they felt that if they had a strong government, there was the potential that someone would become very powerful again, possibly like a king. So they wanted to make sure power was not centralized due to a fear of another situation where one person or group has too much power, just like the King of England had over them. Most of the power was in the state governments, and really no power was in the federal governments. And with that being said, the federal government did not have the power to tax, elect a president, or raise an army. Three things which seem to be very important for for a successful country. And the Articles of Confederation allowed none of this. While there was a lot of wrong in the Articles of Confederation, there were some positives. It successfully ended the American Revolution. It brought states together under one united country. The Northwest Ordinance banned slavery in the Northwest, and the Land Ordinance of 1785 created a system for territories to become states. So although altogether it was a failure, and we're going to see that it's going to be, kind of thrown in the garbage and recreated with the Constitution, there were a few positives that could be taken out of it. Your talking points for today. How did early colonial governments, New England town meetings and Virginia House of Burgesses, show democratic nature of this new land? Basically, how did they show how this was a more democratic land? Explain using evidence. And do you agree with the leaders of the newly formed U.S. government making the Articles of Confederation weak? Why or why not? Explain. And then you have some student-developed talking points, so please have some ready for us. The Mayflower Compact, House of Burgesses, and Fundamental Orders of Connecticut are all examples of the efforts of colonial Americans to A. Use democratic practices in government, B. Protest British land policies, C. Establish religious freedom, or D. Overthrow British royal governors. And our second check for understanding. A major criticism of the Articles of Confederation was that too much power had been given to the A. British monarchy, B. House of Burgesses, C. State governments, or D. National governments. And we will discuss all of that tomorrow. Have a good night.